Welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast, a podcast focused on Overwatch strategy, tactics, characters, and general discussion. I'm your host, Jam, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff. How you doing, man?
Hey, man. I'm doing okay. I wanted to kick this episode off with a bit of an apology, though. It seems that I've been a little bit harsh on Soldier 76, and I imagine we have some listeners that have been shaking their heads at me every time I've talked about not liking him so much. So, funny story, I was in a little funk the other night and decided, what the hell, I'll try Soldier 76 and change things up a little bit. And I kind of loved him. He is pretty damn good, and I ended up being on fire like 87% of the match or something, so sorry, everyone.
Well, I knew you would hit that point because, like I mentioned before, Soldier 76 was definitely a character that the Blizzard creators have been working on for a while. And although on the surface he may seem like he's just another type of your modern FPS character, he is actually... He's the leader of Overwatch. He's actually one of the founding members, and he has a lore and a storyline that's actually very interesting. So, but aside from that, actually playing as him, he's a pretty solid character, and I feel he is not only a connection to your modern FPS, but to even some of your older games like Counter-Strike and Unreal. I mean, he just represents that genre.
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew all that. I don't know. I didn't have my head on straight, but there's going to be a good bit of Soldier 76 going forward, so we'll look forward to that. I did want to touch on some clarification from our last episode where we talked about the patch that had just come out, and we mentioned that Widowmaker had been nerfed. We didn't mention that actually was only on PC. The whole patch was only on PC the other day. Blizzard has stated that those changes are going to be coming in a larger patch, that it will be coming for console in the near future. So those changes haven't taken place yet. It's interesting that they would space that out. I'm still curious over exactly how they're going to balance all of that, but I can't imagine they'll leave it different where Widowmaker is one-shotting Zenyatta's and Tracers on console and not on PC. So I'm sure they'll bring that all in line eventually. So I just wanted to clarify that for console, that's not out yet. That might have confused some people.
Now, that's an interesting dichotomy between the console versus PC, because not everyone might be aware of this, but there's a pretty well-known difference in gameplay between console and PC in a lot of different games. It really comes down to the mouse and keyboard versus the controller. It's heavily believed by a lot of the community that if you use a mouse, you're going to be a lot more accurate. And for people that are hardcore FPS PC gamers, using a mouse and keyboard with someone like Soldier 76 or Widowmaker, who are highly Twitch characters, is extremely beneficial and way more advantageous to you than it would be on a controller. Now, that's not to say you can't be good on a controller, but it's really a matter of preference, and generally it seems to be known that you can be a lot more accurate.
Yeah, I personally have always sworn by mouse and keyboard for first-person shooters. It does feel a little bit sharper on the controls. It feels like if you're getting shot from behind, you can turn your sensitivity up so that you can turn around quicker and respond quicker. And so it's a little bit harder at first usually than a controller, but once you get used to it, I would say that it has a higher ceiling, I guess, for skill players. There was also some other news that came down this week I wanted to touch on. There was a developer video that came out where Jeff Kaplan was talking about the upcoming competitive mode and some of the changes that they've made between when players last had a crack at it in the beta and what it's going to look like now. I'll just kind of go quickly down some points here, and then we can both kind of offer our thoughts on what we think about these changes. So in the beta, the competitive mode was running on 1-month seasons, which I believe mirrors Hearthstone, and it sounds like that's being changed to roughly 3-month seasons that'll emulate a real-life season. So we're going to start with the summer season, and it'll actually be in about 2.5 months of playing and then 2 weeks off between seasons to let people reset and get their head right. So I think that sounds like a better schedule. I think 1-month seasons sounds a little bit hectic. Some other changes, looks like they're going to reduce the amount of sudden death that we're getting. They said that we are getting somewhere between 30 and 50% of games that would go into sudden death in the previous format. And they haven't released the details on exactly how they're going to accomplish this, but they said that that's going to be greatly minimized, and it's also going to resolve on the map that you are playing on, whereas it used to always go to a control point map, which drove some people nuts. The other big change to the formatting, they haven't, again, released all the details on this, but assault maps have undergone some format changes. Sounds like those are just ending way too quickly. The assault team would get the other team on their heels and just push point A straight to point B, and in these matches were ending way too fast. So we're not sure how they're going to do it, but they're going to make some changes so that there's more pushback, and you can get a little bit more, you can recover if you get your team wiped on point A. So I think overall this is going to be a pretty solid launch because they've picked up a lot of feedback from the beta and really responded and made a lot of changes that you don't always see a company willing to make. So I'm pretty hopeful this is going to be pretty solid.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is being talked about, and that's really, there's a lot of excitement for it over the community. What do you think the benefit is to having seasons for a competitive mode versus just a general ranked mode that a lot of different games do? And what do you think the timing of the season really benefits the players?
Well, I think having it set up in seasons is probably good for a number of reasons. I mean, for one thing, you know, if you had a permanent tier system or ranking system, you could have someone that plays nonstop for the first year of the game and is awesome and then stops playing, and for several months they'd probably still be ranked right up at the top and they aren't even active. Or, you know, another example could be you want to take a season off, so you're on a competitive team for 3 months and then you're going to be traveling or you just need a break, and so you take a season off and you don't get penalized for that because it's its own independent ranking system, and then you can come back and start the next one fresh and not be left behind. So I think it's good just to kind of have periodic restarts, and that's essentially how this is going to work. It also allows them to continue to roll out different rewards and perks and things like that. And I expect there will be some pretty awesome sprays and skins that you'll get for achieving a certain ranking. And of course, I guess another point going forward, you probably will only see characters and maps added between seasons, so you don't have a system where somebody gets to like top 10 in the world with a character that the hard counter doesn't exist yet, and then they release it, and you know everything changes. So I think it's good to have the fresh restart every 3 months or so.
Yeah, and it's an interesting detail to actually have the seasons in a timing-based competitive mode, because it's actually almost parallel to real-life sports where there is an off-season. There's times where people can kind of build their teams and really get competitive and train their skills. So it's interesting, and like you said, I feel with the multiple developments in the games, new characters, new DLC, new maps, those types of things coming down the roads, every single update will absolutely change the environment and the feel of the game, hopefully for the better. You know, with Blizzard, you always hope that it's a positive change and that it'll get everyone excited. But yeah, the competitive mode is interesting because it's really going to create a different sort of feel to the game. You know, now competitive, there's already people in there, I feel, that are already ready for the ranked games and already ready to prove themselves and are more than happy to prove themselves in the chat log in one way or another. But I think it's a great thing. More options are good. And best case scenario, it's something you jump in, you know, head first and really give it your all. And worst case scenario, it's just I'll stick with the more casual play now and just kind of get those random groups or play with a group and not have that pressure. So it's really a little something for everyone.
So those were the gameplay changes that they mentioned, and a few other things that don't really involve in-game. The old ranking system that they used in beta has been scrapped. That involved different tiers where once you reached a tier you couldn't fall out, and so some people were not big fans of that, essentially having a safety net where you could play really badly and not be penalized for it beyond a certain point. It's going to be totally scrapped now. No more tiers. Basically, they already have the MMR, or matchmaking ranking, in-game now. That's how they're matching games in quick play. And so that's going to correlate to a new stat called the skill rating. So this is going to be pretty brutal because they are going to show each player's skill rating on right there on the screen for everyone to see. And also, you'll see each team's average skill rating. So that's just going to make it really hard for the people that want to blame other people when they lose and can't accept reality, because your skill rating is going to be right there. And if you're the lowest on your team, it's going to be time to stop talking and time to start figuring out how to get better. So I think that's going to be interesting, but this is what people wanted, so just be careful what you ask for, I guess. And so to go along with the skill rating, though, it sounds like underdogs are going to kind of gain more with wins and lose less with losses, which is kind of what you'd expect. If we on day one go up against the number one ranked team in the world, you would expect that we're going to lose, and so we shouldn't be penalized too much for running right into the expected result. So that's pretty awesome. And I mentioned before some of the rewards that are going to be coming out. They talked about some sprays, and I expect some skins that will let people know right away that you're, on a pretty good team or received a pretty good skill rating from last season. So that'll be cool. That's what Blizzard's always done with like World of Warcraft and things like that. But another thing they mentioned that I think is pretty awesome is it sounds like there's going to be some skins for your actual weaponry, like golden weapons. So I will look forward to that in game.
Yeah, that actually brings me back to the days of GoldenEye, where you had the golden gun, and it was such a simple weapon, but it was something that did a one-hit kill on people. I don't think Overwatch will have one-hit kill weapons, but it's pretty cool to have that type of cosmetic. The thing about skill ratings, it's interesting that you say that, because it's like with a competitive mode in a team-based game, it really depends on the flow of the team and how well you communicate and get along with your team, of course. I think a lot of positivity can come out of it. You can kind of see where you can improve and really work on certain areas of your team that are maybe lacking in skill. However, it can also lead to some negativity as well, with people blaming each other and, well, I usually don't do this bad in the team and it's this guy's fault. Or, there's just a ridiculous amount of excuses with that. But it's something that's voluntary. If you are jumping into a competitive mode and you want to prove yourself, it's good to have that kind of brutal, hard review of what you just did, and it'll kind of show where your team has holes and where it has strengths. And I think that's important when trying to develop your skill. You have to look at yourself and say, where do I need to improve?
And also, you could have people that are changing rosters between seasons based on the skill rating. So it's going to let everyone know. I mean, it's full transparency. You're going to know who your weakest link is. You're going to know who's carrying you. So yeah, I like it, but at the same time, it's easy to say you like it before you get into game and you start to feel accountable. So they still say it's coming in June, which is, very soon at this point, within the next week or two. So we'll see if they can actually pull that off. And one last thing I did want to just mention, because you mentioned GoldenEye and the Golden Gun. All rewards are going to be cosmetic only. They're not going to be handing out golden guns or boosting anyone's damage or anything like that. It's all going to be cosmetic, just like it is now. They want Overwatch to always play with the same balance. That might seem obvious, but just to clarify, they did mention that.
Yeah, thank God. I feel like that's the only fair way to go about it. But speaking of competitive mode, that means that we're going to have to create a team. Do you want to be on my team?
You can try out. It's going to be a tight roster, but we'll figure it out.
Tough competition. But guys, look out for the competitive mode coming soon. I think it's going to be something to be very excited about, and we're really looking forward to it and to see what Blizzard does with this brand new mode in Overwatch.
In Russia, game plays you.
All right, so the next character that we're going to be covering in our character breakdown is actually one of my personal favorites. This character is in the tank role, and she is a beast. Of course, we are talking about Alexandra Zarianova, known as Zarya, and she is a Russian pink-haired soldier who is just a beast of a tank. She's one of my favorites. She is very interesting as a tank because she fights quite differently from a lot of the characters. A tank is generally known as a character who's going to have a lot of HP. They're going to be able to take a lot of damage and pull a lot of the aggro and the enemy fire towards them. But what's interesting about Zarya is she does this in the way of putting shields on both herself and other allies, and that actually increases her strength as well. A very, very fun character to play, and very different from a lot of other games in which you play tanks.
Yeah, Zarya is a really cool character, very unique. definitely different from the other tanks. And as you mentioned, because of her playstyle with her shields, once you get really comfortable with timing them, you can really benefit the team in different ways and make your teammates pretty invulnerable at the right times. So she's a really cool character. I really like that half of her health is actually shields, so that's a really cool way to make her unique and give her that benefit that half of her health pool is going to regenerate on its own. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Zarya, and she is, I would say, probably the highest ceiling tank. When you play against a good Zarya, you feel like they can't be killed.
Yeah, Zarya has 200 health and 200 shield for a total of 400 HP. The interesting thing, and we mentioned it in an earlier podcast, but just to reiterate, the difference between health and shield, when you lose your shield in-game, after a certain amount of time of you not taking damage, your shield actually automatically regenerates yourself. So here you have a beast of a character with 400 health, half of which can regenerate itself without a healer. So that's a big deal for a tank. But before we get to her shields, let's actually get to her main weapon, which is her particle cannon. So the particle cannon is a short-range beam of destructive energy. Really interesting, really fitting for the character Zarya, coming from Russia, working in a sort of soldier/technological field. She really utilizes this technology, but she has to be close to do the damage. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it really doesn't do a lot of damage, and you have to be super close in order to do it. But, and we'll get to this later, when you actually start utilizing her shields in tandem with her particle cannon, you have the potential to do a ridiculous amount of damage. But yeah, her particle cannon, the main fire, is a short-range beam, and then her alternate fire is a different type of attack which kind of lobs almost grenade launcher style. It lobs a explosive charge that does splash damage, not as much damage as the main beam, but it can hit multiple opponents. So you have the choice of hitting one opponent at a time at a really close range, or lobbing something at medium to long range, or even short range, and doing a little less damage, but to multiple opponents. So as a weapon, it already has a lot of versatility.
And just to clarify, the explosive charge is less damage per second, but it is in a burst. So if you get somebody that's a little bit low, it sometimes is faster to just fire that alternate shot and finish them off with it. Or, of course, with the splash damage, if there's a group, it's definitely going to be the way to go. But you see a lot of people that only use the explosive charge or the alternate fire, and that is definitely not the best way to play Zarya, because the primary fire, the particle beam, when it gets charged up, it is very powerful, and it has more range than you would think for what's considered a short-range ability. So the other thing to mention about that is once it gets charged up, the beam itself gets wider, and so it becomes a little bit easier to hit people with it, which is pretty cool.
So yeah, let's talk a bit about the beam charging, because I feel this is something that is definitely not obvious when playing Zarya for the first time. I know that when I played her for the first time in the beta, I would be running in and doing very minimal damage with her particle beam at close range. I'm like, all right, well, I don't get the point. But this is something that is really interesting about this character, because her other two abilities that she has are linked. So she has one that's the particle barrier. So it's a barrier or a shield that she puts around herself that can block her from incoming attacks. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you are completely invulnerable when you have this shield around you. You can't take any damage, and I mean from anything aside from falling off the level, which at that point, that's your fault. But when you're taking damage with the shield, you're not actually taking damage. It just makes you invincible. However, it only lasts 2 seconds. So while that may seem overpowered, it's only a 2-second shield, and then you have to wait a whole nother 10 seconds before you could put it on yourself again. So when you're in the midst of a battle, 10 seconds is a long time to wait before you could be invincible again. So it's not exactly overpowered. However, what's interesting about this is that whenever you take damage while you have that shield up, for that 2-second window of time that you're invulnerable, whenever you take damage, you're actually able to power up your main particle cannon, which is your weapon, and it can charge up to 100 points, which will make it even more powerful. And at that point, once Zarya's at this fully charged, I've been taking damage, I've been absorbing the damage and using it for myself, then she becomes a force to be reckoned with on an offensive standpoint, because she can do a lot of damage with her weapon once she's absorbed the damage.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about Zarya, is that she's kind of an all-around character. She doesn't do a ton of base offensive damage, but if you're playing her right and you're using these shields and actually absorbing damage with them, her offensive output doubles, and it can up to double. And so she becomes not just a tank, but someone who can chase people down and do a lot of damage and kill them, and also be protecting your own team. So for that reason, I think she's definitely one of the favorite tanks, but also one of the harder tanks to play.
Yeah, completely agreed. And on top of that, which you briefly mentioned there, being able to put a shield around yourself is great, but she also can put a projected barrier around other teammates. And the only difference with the projected barrier is that it's on someone else. So it really works the exact same way. It's up for 2 seconds. It'll block all damage for those 2 seconds. It'll power up Zarya's weapon. And the nice thing about giving that shield to someone else is that the cooldown is actually lower than the shield for yourself. So with yourself, you have a 10-second cooldown that you have to wait before you can use it again. You actually wait 8 seconds for the projected barrier. So you have more opportunities in a battle on average to use a projected barrier on someone else than your own particle barrier. Now, if you use these in tandem with each other, and let's say Zarya and another teammate of choice are running in, then you can put both shields down, one on yourself, one on the other teammate, and if you're both taking damage, boom, you're getting almost fully charged, if not fully charged, particle cannon, and you can do a lot of damage right after taking that. So it's a really beastly weapon if you know how to use it correctly, but it really all comes down to timing.
I also really like playing Zarya as part of a tank tandem for that reason. Playing her with another tank gives you someone that you can reliably shield and really keep your weapon charged, because you know the other tank is going to draw fire too. So playing Zarya, as a tandem with another tank is a really, really powerful combo. And if you do it right, it just feels like everyone on your team is invincible.
And then piled on top of that, Zarya has an ultimate ability, which is one of my favorite in the game, and it's so useful in a team scenario. I mean, she really is a team player. It's called the Graviton Surge. Some people call it the Gravity Bomb or the Black Hole, but essentially it's a gravity bomb that Zarya shoots out shortly in front of her, and it pulls other enemies into it like a black hole. So it actually has a suction ability to pull the entire team, if they're nearby, or anyone who's nearby, into the area, and then it deals slight damage while they're trapped in it. It lasts 4 seconds, which is a long time to be completely immobile, but you are still able to fight back while you're in it, so you're not completely helpless. However, not being able to move in scenarios where you have 4 or 5 or even all 6 teammates stuck in this, you are a floating target for the entire opposition, and it can be extremely dangerous when paired up with other ultimates from other characters.
Yeah, we mentioned in a previous episode how good Mei's ultimate is for team play, and I think it's trumped only by Zarya's, because this Gravity Surge is, I think it's the best ultimate in the game, provided that you are playing with people you can actually coordinate with. I mean, the list of characters that it goes well with, it's like more than half the characters in the game, and all you have to do is let people know you're about to use it, and your Reaper, Hanzo, even a Genji, anyone with a high power offensive ultimate is going to be able to just wipe out the other team. And because you're Zarya, if you're not sure that your ally is going to get their ultimate off and finish off the other team, you just fire the Gravity Surge and then shield your ally, and then they run in and they're invincible for 2 seconds and the other team's dead. So yeah, this is, again, provided that you're coordinating and actually talking to your teammates, which it's Overwatch, so I don't know why you're playing if you're not. This is probably the best ultimate in the game, in my opinion.
And it really creates some interesting scenarios for your team when you can pull people into a specific position. speaking of different strategies with Zarya, so when you're using her Graviton Surge, the most obvious thing to do is to pull them all in and have everybody attack them. But there's some other interesting things you can do as well. For example, in Ilios, there's that specific map where you have the giant pit in the middle, what I like to call the moon door, for Game of Thrones fans, if you know. And it's a circular hole in the middle of the level that you're kind of fighting around on the point. You can throw the Graviton Surge kind of on the side of the cylinder there and pull people in. And you don't even really have to shoot them, because once it runs out, they're going to drop straight down. So unless you're a character like Winston or D.Va who can kind of fly or maneuver their way out, or somebody who can wall climb, you can pretty much just drop them down the hole. But only people that are going to be able to react quickly enough are going to be able to survive that. Also, it's a great tool to utilize when you're reaching the end of your timer and you're trying to hold a point. A lot of the times you'll see teams will hold off, they'll save their ultimates, they won't rush in until maybe the last 10 seconds of the match when they feel that they can get into overtime. You throw that Graviton Surge down right outside the point and they get pulled off to a point where they're not standing on there and it won't trigger overtime. So there's a lot of useful strategies you can do with just Zarya alone, let alone the strategies you can create working in tandem with your team as well.
Game of Thrones, I have no idea what that is.
Team Littlefinger.
Yeah, Zarya's awesome, and her ultimate, like you said, can be used for a lot of different purposes than just wiping out the other team, like holding a point or getting other people off of a point. So you got to play around with it. It's just another example of the playground that you've given us with these maps in Overwatch and with these abilities, because you're going to see different uses continue to pop up as the weeks and months go on and people get more and more comfortable with these characters. So getting into the section we like to do with these breakdowns, who do you think that Zarya is really strong against, and who do you have trouble with when you're playing Zarya?
Well, I'll say this much. When I'm playing Zarya, just kind of knee-jerk reaction to that question, I feel that one of the types of characters that I really enjoy chasing are the attack class characters and some of the defense class characters. Your Hanzos, Genjis, Bastion, anybody with a low health pool, because I feel that you could just jump on them, and especially when you're fully powered up, you can ruin them pretty quickly. And with that particle cannon, it's a little different from Symmetra, who we discussed in an earlier episode, where the beam kind of tracks on people. Zarya, you actually have to keep the reticle on the opponent. So it's a little trickier. You have to make sure that you have good aim, that you're keeping the beam. It is an ongoing beam that you could just hold down the button and it'll continue to do damage. But if you're good enough at tracking enemies and really keeping the reticle on them, a Tracer, a Hanzo, you're going to take them down really, really quick, especially when you're charged up well. I do enjoy going after other tanks as well. However, I don't like doing it unless I am charged up. Even if you're not fully charged up, you can be a force to be reckoned with against some of the lower health pool characters, but you really don't want to go after a tank unless you have that fully charged particle beam. So you utilize your shield, utilize the shields on your allies. There is actually a number under the reticle that is different from your ammo. It will go from 0 to 100, and that's going to show the amount of power that your particle beam is at. So you can kind of have a quick reference in the direction that you're aiming of how powerful you are based on how much damage you've taken with your shield. And when you're really, really high, that's when I go after tanks. But generally, I go after people with low HP, and I just try to clear out the map and be a target for them to point to. And that's going to kind of keep the healer in check. That's going to keep a lot of the other attack characters that are protecting me safe. And you pair that with the shield on yourself and your teammate of choice every 8 to 10 seconds, and you're going to create some massive chaos in the battle.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to kind of disagree with you on Bastion. I think that Zarya has a pretty tough time with Bastion. I mean, it's all situational, but he does so much damage that even if you pop that shield, again, I mean, it's situational, but I think Zarya has a hard time charging Bastion for sure. Also, Pharah, Widowmaker, and Hanzo, kind of the range characters, I think, are the ones that can give Zarya the most trouble. But I think when I'm playing Zarya, I always feel pretty strong against Mei. You can use her shields to disrupt Mei's Frost Beam, and I just think that Mei can't do a whole lot to get to Zarya. The best case scenario for Mei is to wait for help or to get away. So that's kind of a win. And I think Winston probably is weak against every other tank, and that certainly includes Zarya. McCree probably has a lot of trouble. I mean, you mentioned attack characters in general, but McCree, because he's so reliant on trying to burst down, that when you get the shields up, he's pretty much got to tuck tail and run. Though I think it's worth mentioning, you don't really play Zarya to counter anybody, in my opinion. I think she's so helpful to the team in general that, you know, it's always going to be a good choice to play Zarya, and there really aren't many characters that will force me to switch off of her.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I feel that when it comes to your Bastions and your long-range characters, like you said, is completely situational. You can use your alt fire to land longer range attacks, but it's definitely something that you're going to have to practice with. I was thinking more getting the jump on the character, but that actually kind of brings me to the other thing that I feel is a weakness for Zarya. She's one of those characters that really doesn't have many mobility options. She runs very slowly, she jumps like a normal character, and she doesn't have anything that she can do outside of teammates helping her, or the occasional using your own alt fire to blast yourself a little higher in the air, which is more of an advanced technique, but I don't really see myself using it a whole lot, to get onto higher platforms. So if there's anywhere you need to go, you literally need to walk there. So yeah, it really is tricky against some of the longer range, more powerful characters, but if you can get the jump on them and you have the charge, there is a chance. But once again, completely situational, and you have to be kind of working with your team to distract enemies that you may not be as strong against. Going back to what you were saying about not playing her as a main tank, while you absolutely can play her as a main tank, I personally agree with you. I do enjoy using her as kind of a secondary tank, especially if you have like a Roadhog or a Winston in there, or a D.Va, someone who's going to kind of draw the fire away. The interesting thing that I've seen about Zarya, unless it's, you know, some of the more advanced players that you encounter online, is that she's generally pretty ignored. I think that a lot of people maybe don't play her correctly, so they don't see her as much of a threat and as just someone who can pop on a shield for a couple seconds on someone. But the thing about it is, if you ignore Zarya and you just focus on a tank or a healer, a good Zarya will drop the shield on them just long enough where when you're trying to do damage on them for those 2 seconds, you fully power up her weapon. And at that point, it's done. She can come up to you. She can ruin your life in a matter of seconds just because you were ignoring her. So I think using her in tandem with other tanks and then also throwing out her shields on the characters that you feel are going to get attacked is the best way to play her. I think in a match that's chaotic melee, everyone's running around shooting, that's where I find she's the most fun to play, because the entire time that you're trying to keep yourself alive, you're looking at your cooldown times for your shields and you're saying, okay, when do I need to drop my shield? Who's going to use their ult? That's when I need to drop my shield. Which of the 5 other members of my team are going to need a shield? You know, you're going to hold on to it for that. And it's really about protecting your teammates and yourself. And the better you are at doing that, the more powerful you're going to become. And then you become a damage dealer. So it's a really interesting, versatile character for sure.
So just to kind of wrap Zarya up, are there any tips, tricks, anything that you think might not be obvious for people picking up Zarya for the first time that you'd want to throw out there that we haven't already covered?
Absolutely. It's important to know some of the smaller details. So her alt fire, for example, Zarya has a total of 100 ammo on her particle cannon. Now, this is something that just ticks down over time as you hold the main fire, and it's just ongoing damage. However, every time you do her alt fire, which is the grenade launcher, more widespread damage type of tack, it actually uses 25 of your ammo. So it uses a quarter of your ammo every time you launch it out. That's important to know, because if you're gonna be launching multiple one after another, you have to keep in mind how much ammo you have and how much you can do before you have to reload, because as a character who doesn't move very quickly, doesn't have a lot of mobility options, it's gonna be important to know when you're gonna reload, the exact window of time which you can attack, and you can use that in tandem with your shields to kind of cover yourself when you are reloading if need be. So that's very, very important. Another tip with her is using that shield. So we already mentioned her barrier is going to have a 2-second time in which she can take no damage. When's the best time to use that? The most obvious answer when you're in the chaos of the fight is using it during some of the other characters' ultimates. Something like a Hanzo ultimate where he's shooting those dragons that do ongoing damage and a ridiculous amount of damage. You can put a shield up and completely block that for 2 seconds and power up your weapon greatly in that short amount of time. So it's really going to be knowing how to time the shields. It's extremely important to time it correctly because 2 seconds goes by extremely quickly when you're in the fight. But any opportunity you can use to power up your weapon and also protect you and your teammates at the same time is going to be beneficial to the entire team.
Just a few things that I've noticed playing Zarya. First of all, you mentioned the alt fire taking up 25 ammo and the regular particle beam just kind of draining one at a time. So when you get below 25 ammo, you can still fire an alt fire. If you have 1 ammo left, you can fire an explosive charge, even though it normally would consume 25, and it's going to be a full strength shot that just consumed 1 ammo. So if you're chasing somebody down and you get down to like 5 ammo, it's going to be more damage for the 100 ammo that you had and more burst damage to fire the explosive charge. So be aware of that when you get low on ammo. Another great tip, turn on allied health meters in the settings for Zarya. It's a really good way to know who is about to die and could use your shield imminently. I mean, you don't always have to use it based on someone's health. You know, you should have a healer on the team that's taking care of that problem. But if you see the other tank is about to die or your healer is getting focused, it's a really good way to pick that up quickly. So I found it's very helpful to have that turned on. The last thing I would mention, we talked about the beam and, you know, at length about charging it up and using the shields to do that. It's actually very easy to tell when it's getting charged up. There are a lot of different indicators, so you don't have to constantly be wondering or trying to find a little number on your reticle that can be hard to see depending on the background. I mean, your crosshair becomes thicker, your beam becomes wider, the gun becomes louder, and there's a ball, like an energy ball, on the rifle that you can see on your screen that gets much bigger. So aside from the numerical value, there's a lot of different ways to tell that you're getting more and more charged up and are going to do more and more damage.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, if you're fighting a team that has a Zarya on it, keep a close eye on her armor and kind of like her costume because she will actually glow brighter. She has these kind of pods on her suit that will glow strong when she is at full power. So if you see a Zarya and she's just glowing with energy, then you know she's at full strength or close to full strength and she's going to be able to take you out pretty quickly. So it's really
time to run.
Exactly. So it's going to be important to kind of watch those details. Just one of those little details that's really important in both offense and defense. Also, a kind of fun fact about Zarya as well. This isn't confirmed, but it's pretty much accepted in the community. Zarya's design is actually based off an actual Blizzard employee that was on the Diablo 3 team. She's originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, so she is a Russian employee. Her name's Tamara Bakalcheva. Google it, look it up. You're going to see some striking resemblances to Zarya, including the pink hair.
Wait, she's not based off of Ivan Drago from Rocky IV?
There might be a little bit of that in there, too. So that was our character breakdown of Zarya. If you have any other strategies or tips to share about Zarya, please feel free to let us know in the comments. Share your experiences with us. And also, please follow us on Twitter. You can find me at HappyJamOP. And Jeff?
I'm at TruthEaterOP.
And check out our website, oppodcast.com, for more episodes, news, and videos, and upcoming podcasts as well. If you like the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support will enable us to upgrade and improve our hardware and software to bring you a bigger and better podcast. We've really loved the support we've been getting from you guys. We've had a great response. And as always, we just truly appreciate it. And thanks for supporting us and doing what we love to do. This has been Jam and Jeff with the OP Overwatch Podcast, and we'll see you next time.